Good morning po. Our discussion is about psychological dimensions of curriculum development. So, under po nito, meron po kaming 6 topics na i-discuss and we will start po with the theories of learning. So, alam naman po natin na iba't iba yung way ng mga students natin kung paano sila matuto because our brains are all unique and our experiences all contribute the different ways we learn. So, psychologists have spent countless hours performing tests to better understand kung paano nga po ba natututo yung mga learners po natin. So, we have there are five main educational learning theories that we educators can utilize to help us enhance our classrooms and make better learning for all students. So, let's start po with Behaviorist Theory. So, it is a popular concept that focuses on how students learn. It focuses on the idea that all behaviors are learned through interaction with the environment. So, in every classroom, di ba po, usually we have a student in class who is difficult to manage and work with. Ito po yung mga students na mahirap i-control, na kailangan natin ng sobrang habang pasensya talaga dahil nade-distract po yung class natin dahil sa kanila. So, behaviorism is a branch of psychology when applied to a classroom setting, focuses on conditioning student behavior with various types of behavior reinforcement called operant conditioning. So, there are 4 types of reinforcement po. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, presentation, punishment, and extinction. So, dito po tayo sa positive reinforcement. Simply praise student when he she behaves well or successfully complete a task. So, it is simply by giving praise to a student. Saying nice things to our students will work. So, positive reinforcement works because brain connects to the action to the reward. So, ano po ba yung mga example natin dito sa positive reinforcement? Yun nga po, pagbibigay ng praise. Kapag during the recitation po, kapag nakasagot sila, sinasabihan natin sila ng very good, excellent, yung mga ganun po. So, another example po is yung kapag nakakasagot din po sila sa mga recitation, binibigyan natin sila ng candies, chocolates as a reward. And ano pa po ba? Kapag tahimik po sila na sa mga activities na ipapagawa natin or tahimik sila during the discussion, sasabihin natin, hindi na sila magpo-quiz. So, those are examples of positive reinforcement po. So, next po is negative reinforcement. It is not a punishment. Rather, it's rewarding good behavior by taking away something your students see as negative. So, it's not a punishment. It's not a negative thing. Instead, it's about removing a negative thing. So, as teachers can use negative reinforcement to motivate students and change their behavior. Let's say, for example po, magpapagawa tayo ng book report. And may student tayo na ayaw gumawa ng book report because he or she is not into writing kasi yung pagsusulat po is boring para sa iba. So, we could offer him or her to do his report in another way. So, another example po, a teacher can eliminate the night's homework if the students or the learners study hard and accomplish a lot in class. So, kapag nangyayari yun palagi, the learner will consistently work harder and be more productive while in the classroom. So, by removing something he sees as negative, you've reinforced a separate positive behavior. So, next po is presentation punishment. And is used unpleasant or displeasing stimuli to reduce the reoccurrence of a particular behavior by causing an individual to avoid the behavior in the future. So, for example po, yung paggamit po ng phone ng mga students natin during the discussion. So, siguro po lahat tayo na-experience na natin yung ganito na may gumagamit ng cellphone during the discussion. So, kapag may tumawag po sa kanila, or kapag naglalaro sila ng phone nila, na nagko-cause po ng interruption sa class natin. So, ang ginagawa po natin, Siguro po, ako po, na-try ko na kasi na mag-capture ng phone. Tapos, kinuha na lang nila sa principal's office. So, ganun po yung ginawa ko. So, the next time po na may klase kami, wala na naglalabas ng cellphone kasi ayaw na nilang makapture yung phone nila. So, another example po, hindi ko lang siya nagagamit sa classroom, nagagamit ko rin siya sa bahay. So, kapag yung anak ko po, pinapatulog ko noon, umiiyak siya kasi ayaw niya pa matulog. Ang gagawin ko, pinapalo ko yung puwet niya. So, the next time po na patutulugin ko na siya, hindi na siya umiiyak kasi ayaw niya na mapalo yung puwet niya. So, ganun po yung sa presentation punishment, causing an individual to avoid the behavior. Last po is yung extinction or removal of reinforcement. It refers to the cases where the learner's environment undergoes a change such that a previously reinforced response no longer works to produce the reinforcement which it used to produce. So, in psychology po, it refers to the gradual weakening of a conditioned response that results in the behavior or disappearing. So, for example po, nag-set po tayo ng strategy para maaga pumasok yung mga students. Sinabi po natin na pag maaga po pumasok yung mga students na yan is bibigyan natin sila ng additional points sa quiz. So, ang magiging response po ng mga students natin is maaga sila papasok para makakuha po sila ng additional points. So, ganun po yung nangyari halos araw-araw, ano. So, the next day po, hindi ka na nagbigay ng additional point. So, ang nangyari po, yung response po from the learners, hindi na sila maagang papasok kasi hindi ka na nagbibigay ng additional points. So, yung response po nila na una, na laging pumapasok, mawawala na po yun. Parang nag-disappear na po. 3 of the most influential psychologists who contributed to the behaviorism: B.F. Skinner, John B. Watson, and Ivan Pavlov. So, yung diniscuss po natin kanina is yung research po ni B.F. Skinner, which is yung operant conditioning. Yung kay Ivan Pavlov naman po is yung classical conditioning na meron po siyang dalawang components, yung stimulus and yung response. So, meron po siyang experiment sa dog and sa food. So, in this case po, ang food yung stimulus and yung response na ini-elicit sa mga dog ay salivation. Ang food by nature is gustong-gusto po ng mga aso, diba? So, it naturally elicits some response. Kaya ang tawag sa mga food is unconditioned stimuli. So, pinair niya po yung component po na yon sa bell, which is kapag narinig na po ng aso yung bell, nagkakos po ng salivation kasi meron pong food na binibigay sa kanya whenever narinig niya na po yung sound ng bell. Okay, so next po tayo sa cognitive theory. So, isipin po natin yung mga subject na sobrang nag-click po sa atin or kumbaga, ang bilis pong intindihin ng mga content ng subject na yun. And isipin din po natin yung mga subject na sobrang nahirapan na tayo na kahit anong gawin nating pag-aaral talagang ang hirap i-gets ng subject na yun. So, as teachers face both of these situation with learners every single day, ano po. So, some learners struggle with more things than others and it's teachers' role to work to help students understand and learn. And yung pressure po na yun nasa ating mga teacher eh. Kasi nakaka-pressure po na paano kaya kung hindi matuto yung ibang students, di ba may ganun po tayong thinking. No? So, kailangan lahat sila matuto. So, dito po kasi sa cognitive theories, it will help us na magkaroon po ng mga tools para magamit po natin sa classroom. And it will create an environment full of knowledge. Makakuha po tayo ng mga strategies for each unique students. So, ang cognitive understanding po kasi is very interesting theory po siya. Nakafocus po siya sa thought. So, cognition encourages students to think about their thinking. So, ibig sabihin nito po is to unlock new concept or subject that uh, they struggle with. So, to understand cognitive learning theory, it's important to learn the term metacognition. So, metacognition is the awareness of your brain's thoughts and thought processes. This concept of knowing how you think is the basis for cognitive learning theory. This theory on cognition asks learners to look at thinking and mental processes and how cognitive thinking can be influenced by external and internal factors. So, sabi po, if your cognitive processes are working normally, it's easier to learn. But if something is off with a cognitive process, difficulties can ensue. So, yung cognitive learning po can be broken down into social cognitive theory and cognitive behavioral theory. So, mamaya po, i-discuss po natin yung dalawa na yun. So, si Plato and Descartes po, yung two first philosophers to dive deeply into the theory of cognitive behavior and knowledge. Si Jean Piaget po, yung naging famous sa cognitive psychology because of his cognitive development. Yeah. According po kay Piaget, merong 4 stages of cognitive development po. So, ito po yung sensory motor stage, pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage, and formal operational stage, in which dito po sa cognitive development, pinakita niya po how children think, explore, and figure things out. In every stage po nakikita yung development ng knowledge, ng skills, ng problem solvings, and yung dispositions po, in which it helps children to think about and understand the world around them. So, also yung brain development po is part po siya ng cognitive development. The social cognitive theory. It is the idea that learning happens in social context and is impacted by the person, environment, and behavior. So, yung social interaction po, yung mga nakikita po natin sa paligid natin, yung mga na-observe po nating behavior from other people, is malaki po yung nagiging impact po nun sa behavior and learning po ng students. So, for example po, a teacher can help students see the outcome of a certain behavior. They can show students that when they listen to instructions and follow quickly, there is more time at the end of the day for a reward. So, this gives students the motivation to follow that social behavior. So, in cognitive behavioral theory naman po, it is the idea that how we think, how we feel, and how we behave are all directly connected together. So, this means po na yung thoughts determine our feelings and behavior. So, for example po niyan, si student po is hindi po siya good at math. That it doesn't come naturally to them for some reason, that they are numb. And so, for example po, meron po tayong students na hindi po siya magaling sa math. So, that it doesn't come naturally to them for some reason, that they are dumb and won't understand. They are likely to feel frustration and anger during math lesson, and nagkukos po yun ng to perform poorly. So, the cognitive behavioral theory is closely connected to social cognitive theory, and it identifies how external forces and internal forces, your thoughts, impact your learning. So, for example po, meron tayong student na hindi magaling sa math, that it doesn't come naturally to them for some reason. Naiisipin po nila na bobo sila. So, nagkakaroon po ng frustration and anger during math lesson, and pwede po siyang mag-cause ng to perform poorly. So, here are some example of cognitive learning activities that we can use to increase learning opportunities for our students. So, we can give activities like make a game of memorizing poetry or facts, write a journal entry that asks students to think about what they learned that, that day or week. Students can demonstrate work in front of the class, have students create their own learning game as they work to master facts or a subject, ask students to explain a problem to other students and teach it to them, put a list of questions on the board, and have students answer them to learn about their thought process. Next po is yung Constructivist Theory. Constructivists see the learner as a constructor of knowledge. New learning is shaped by schemas which the learner brings to the learning process. So this model was entrenched in the learning theories by Dewey, Piaget, Vygotsky, Gagne, and Brunner. So, the constructivist theory is based around the idea that learners are active participants in their learning journey. So, yung knowledge po is nako-construct din po siya based sa own experiences. So, as educator, it is important po na alam natin yung constructivist theory because each student po has their own unique perspective based po sa mga unique experiences po nila. So, constructivism is a learning theory that equates learning with creating meaning from experience. So, constructivism can help engage and motivate our students by making them take a more active role in the learning process. So, for example po, nagiging passive participants po yung mga students natin sa learning process. So, we can use constructivism theory para po maging active participants po sila sa learning process. So, pwede po tayong magbigay sa kanila ng mga activities like role-playing, pagkakaroon po ng debate about current event issues, and engaging in real-world activities. Of constructivism has many elements. These principles outline the theory as a whole and how they affect the learning of the students. The main points are listed below. So first, knowledge is constructed. So we know that every student begins the learning journey with some pre-existing knowledge and then continues to build their understanding on top of that. They will select which pieces of the experience to add, making everyone's knowledge unique. So next is learning is a social activity. And ito po yung pagkakaroon ng group work, group discussion, group conversations. Kasi po yung pakikipag-interact po nila sa ibang students is nakakatulong po para makapag-construct sila ng knowledge. Learning is an active process, so students must actively engage in discussions and activities in order to construct knowledge. Learning is contextual. Learning is contextual. So, yung learning also occurs po in the situation within the context of our lives or alongside the rest of our understanding. We reflect on our lives and classify the new information as it fits into our current perspective. Learning exists in the mind. So, yung pagkakaroon po ng hands-on activities and physical experiences is hindi po siya enough para ma-retain po yung knowledge natin. So, yung In order po to develop thorough understanding, students must experience activities mentally as well. Knowledge is personal because every person's perspective is unique. So, will be the knowledge gained. Every individual comes into the learning activity with their own experiences and will take away different things as well. Motivation is key to learning. Similar to active participation, motivation is key to making connections and creating understanding. Students cannot learn if they are unwilling to reflect on pre-existing knowledge and activate their thought process. Okay, so let's proceed to the Humanist Theory. This theory states that the student is the authority on how they learn and that all of their needs should be met in order for them to learn well. The humanistic learning theory was developed by Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, and James F. T. Bugenal in the early 1900s. Okay. So, unlike other learning philosophies where the authority includes the environment, sociopolitical situation, dogma, and individual situation, humanistic learning revolves around the learning being the source of authority. So, ibig sabihin po nun that students determine the learning methods and materials. So, ano po yung role ni learner? Learning serves a purpose, plans the learning, personal involvement, fits individual goals, and life purpose, higher self. So ideally, learning should be an active process where the student is engaged with the learning activities to acquire the knowledge specific to their situation. So, since a major theme is the learner being the source of authority, the learner determines what learning materials are used and how they will learn the material. So, they could choose to read, listen to speeches, watch movies, or practice what they have learned through social interaction or by producing a specific output. So, ano na po, kung sa humanistic theory po, si learner ay ang authority, that doesn't mean po na wala na pong role si teacher. Okay, so ano po ang role ni teacher? Siya po ay facilitator, coach, mentor, listener, and problem solver. So, the teacher assumes that the role of a coach or facilitator to assist the student in establishing and using their learning strategy to achieve their goal. So, ibig sabihin po nun, nagiging facilitator and coach po tayo para aware po tayo sa students' unique needs to be effective at supporting the students in acquiring the desired knowledge. So, the teacher can also assist in designing the strategy to support the individual students' intellectual and emotional development. Okay, last po itong Connectivism Theory. Connectivism is the 21st century's new learning theory. It was first introduced in 2005 by two theorists, George Siemens and Stephen Dons. So, connectivism is a learning theory that explains how internet technologies have created new opportunities for people to learn and share information across the World Wide Web and among themselves. So, 20 years ago po, siguro lahat naman, natry din po natin na mag-research po sa library. So, ngayon po kasi yung mga students natin, they just simply ask or type the question in the Google, tapos lalabas na po yung sagot sa hinahanap nilang tanong, ano po. So, it's clear that technology is changing how students learn in and out of the classroom rather than learning from teachers and textbooks. So, those are the 5 learning theory po